As you've heard, we're continuing our trek through the Bible. We've been in the book of Psalms, which is the Hebrew or Jewish songbook, 150 songs on different themes of life. They're real life, emotive kinds of journal entries that became songs that the Jewish people would sing either privately or corporately. And they're on all different themes of life, the soul songs I call them. Songs to sing when you have failed, the songs of confession. Songs to sing when you feel defeated, the laments, singing the blues. It started with the Hebrew people singing the blues. There are songs of thanksgiving when you're happy. We'll look at that next week. There are songs of praise when you want to give a shout out to God. And then there's a category called songs of trust. And these are critical. I've listed them in your notes. There's more than a dozen of them, songs of trust. But when you get down to the root of trust, here's why it's so important. Only in the religions of the Bible, the Jewish and Christian religions, does everything boil down to two simple ideas. And it's this. And you study world religions, this is like totally off the charts. This is totally unique. It all boils down to God being a God of love who creates humanity because he wants to love humanity. He wants to relate with humanity. He puts Adam and Eve in a garden, a world that he made for humanity. Did you know that we were made for him, but everything else was made for us? I mean, he loves us, so he's a God of love who moves with love. And what he asks in response from us is something called trust. Other words are faith. Another word is to believe. It's all the same idea. To place your trust or confidence in him is what he wants. And that's the main thing, really, that he wants. Everything else is secondary. Like obedience is actually a demonstration of trust in the Bible. It's not that God's looking just for this obedient relationship from these creatures that he wants to be in servitude. No, he wants it to be a love relationship where he loves you and you love him back with your trust or your faith or your belief. And because you believe in him, you walk in his ways. Obedience is the demonstration of faith or trust. And so in the garden, God loved Adam and Eve and put them there. And then he put a tree there that was really a love test kind of a tree. He said, look, I'm putting this one tree there, and this is the no tree. And by saying no to that tree every day, you're trusting me. You're not just obeying me, but you're trusting that I love you and that I'm good and that you believe in me, you have faith in me. So the serpent comes along and he did not attack Adam and Eve's obedience, he attacked their trust. And he said, has God said to you, you shall not eat from this tree? And they said, yeah, that's what God said. Oh, well, God's lying to you. He doesn't love you. He knows that in the day you eat of it, you'll be like God, knowing good and evil. He's withholding from you. He doesn't really love you. And right at that moment, they had a trust question in front of them, a faith question. Do I trust God or do I trust this other voice? And they decided they trusted the other voice, and then they obeyed that voice. They ate of the tree. Obedience is the fruit of trust. You obey who you trust. And so the whole Bible boils down to this issue of trust or faith. In fact, the whole issue of salvation, when you think about it, how does it work? Again, God moves toward us with love. He sees us in our sin condition, so he sends his own son. Talk about sacrifice, Memorial Day, people laying down their lives. God says, I love you, for God so, what? Loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, right? So the incarnation of Christ is an act of love. And what does God want in response? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son so that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. You see, he moves with love. He looks for belief or faith or trust. And the moment you place your faith in Jesus, you become a child of God. We just sang it. I am a child of God. How do you become a child of God? John chapter 1, to as many as received him, he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name. So 98 times in the Gospel of John, the sole requirement for becoming a child of God is the word believe. Believe, trust. All of the religion of the Bible boils down to God moving with love and him inviting us to trust, to believe in him. Everything else issues forth from whether or not we believe in him. We either walk in his ways as a demonstration of trust, or we walk against his ways as a demonstration that we don't trust his will, his goodness. So when you come to the songs of trust in the book of Songs, they're critical because these are real people like King David trying to come back to the place where they see God clearly and they trust him in the time of trouble. The songs of trust were all written in times of trouble, times of turmoil. And they are people trying to bolster their faith in God, to come back to that place where they're seeing all the turmoil, but then they're trying to come back and see God and say, I do trust you. Against all hope, I trust you. I trust you even though life looks horrible. I trust you. So the songs of trust are that. We're going to look at Psalm 62 today, which is David's classic song or psalm of trust. But I'm going to need your help as we read it. I have to ask you to put on a Hebrew literary cap, a Hebrew grammatical cap before we read it, because this song has, at the beginning of 6 different lines, it has a Hebrew word, a 2-letter word that we would spell A-K, ak, ak. And ak means only, exclusively, or alone. So if I were Hebrew and you asked me, what baseball team do I root for? I would say, ak, Tigers. Meaning, I don't want any other team to win. I only root for Tigers. If you ask me what kind of car I like to drive, what kind of vintage car is really the car, I would say, ak, Austin Healey. Somebody whispered it right here. Somebody knew. Okay, ak, Austin Healey. There is no other car. Ak, only, alone, exclusively. So ak occurs at the beginning of 6 different lines, and we're going to translate it. Some of your translations use the word alone. Some translations miss it completely, but when you uncover this in the Hebrew, it's amazing. We're going to translate it only, and when we read the psalm together right now, whenever you see an only, you have to say it like you really mean it. You have to say only like that when we read it, okay? First, I want you to practice the Hebrew word, and it'll require you to spit on the person in front of you. So go like, ak, ak, ak. Now you're Hebrew, ak, ak. You can stop now. Last night, this young mother had her little baby boy, 1-year-old, in her arms, and she said, the whole service, he was going, ak, ak, ak. You're never too young to learn a Hebrew word. So now you know ak, you know Hebrew. And you're going to read this psalm with me, and whenever you see an only, you're going to shout it. And I want you to watch for the different ways that David applies the word only, because he doesn't only apply the word only to God, although that's the primary reference, only God, can save me. But he uses it a couple of different ways with twists. So let's read Psalm 62 together, nice and loud. Let's put up the first line. Okay, you ready? Only my soul waits in silence for God. From him is my salvation. Only he is my rock and my salvation, my stronghold. I shall not be greatly shaken. How long will you assail a man that you may murder him, all of you? Like a leaning wall, like a tottering fence. Only they have counseled to thrust him down from his high position. They delight in falsehood. They bless with their mouth, but inwardly they curse. Only my soul, wait in silence for God, for my hope is from him. Only he is my rock and my salvation, my stronghold. I shall not be shaken. On God, my salvation and my glory rest. The rock of my strength, my refuge is in God. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge for us. Only vanity are men of low degree, and men of rank are a lie. In the balances they go up, they are together lighter than breath. Do not trust in oppression. Do not vainly hope in robbery. If riches increase, do not set your heart upon them. Once God has spoken, twice I've heard this, that power belongs to God, and loving kindness is yours, O Lord, for you recompense a man according to his work. There it is, the only psalm, the Ach psalm. And isn't it cool how when you kind of untranslate from English back into Hebrew, you discover something that the writer put there as a literary device to help you remember forever the only psalm. Ach, the only psalm. I titled The Only Psalm. I think that's such a great title, but I didn't think of it. I was in Aberdeen in 1989 with my family doing doctoral studies, and when you're doing doctoral studies, you think you know something that other people could never figure out, You're too smart for your own good. PhD, piled high and deep. And so I go to this Scottish Brethren church, get invited to speak. I found this secret in Psalm 62, the only psalm. So I thought I would give them this message on Ach, and nobody would ever know this. I give the sermon, and in this little church, at the end of the service, the speaker, whoever, would stand out at the end of the granite steps going out into the city, and you'd shake people's hands, and this little Scottish lady, probably 85, comes up, and she goes, "Thank you, laddie, for that sermon on the only psalm." And I said, "What? What did you call it?" She said, "The only psalm." And then she walked away. And I suddenly realized she'd known it was the only psalm since before I was born. You never put one over on the Scottish Brethren. If it's in the Bible, they've already found it. And she had found it, and she's the one who called it the only psalm. And so I've stolen her title. Thank you, Scottish lady. I've stolen her title, and forever I will remember Psalm 62, and I hope you will, as the only psalm, okay? Ach psalm. It breaks down into 5 parts. We'll go through it real quickly, and then I'm going to show you a story of a family in our church that demonstrates trusting God and trusting in his love. The first part is the declaration. I call it the Ach declaration, where David just basically said, God is my Ach, my only source of trust. He says it twice in the first 2 verses. Only my soul waits in silence for God. From him is my salvation. Only he is my rock, my salvation, my stronghold. I shall not be greatly shaken. He had a lot of things in life that could shake him. He was a king. He was a warrior. He had political, economic, personal, military challenges, all kinds of challenges. And yet he knew deep in his heart of hearts that he needed to silence his soul and just get quiet before God and refocus on God and God's character. He knew the only way to survive in a life full of trouble and turmoil was to get his soul waiting in silence before God. And so I ask you this morning, what is it that troubles you right now? What is it that troubles you? And one of the things that troubles me is just in the last 24 hours, I heard of 2 little tiny babies that are suffering severely. One named Veda and one named Carolyn. And I'm just going to ask you, as we go through the service, apart from everything else that's troubling you, those 2 things trouble my soul, that these 2 little infants are suffering and hanging on the brink of life in hospitals, Veda and Carolyn. And if you could just remember those 2 names as we go along to lift them up. But what is it that troubles you this morning? What is it you're worried about? Is it your future? Is it the plans? Is it a relationship? Is it your job, your finances, your health? Your baby, your teenager, your marriage, what is it? David would say, you've got to come to the place where your soul waits in silence. You still the noise all around you, and you just get silent, and you wait in silence for one answer, and that is God only. God only. God only is the answer for those 2 little infants and whatever's troubling you. The reality of life, though, is that life is noisy and it is full of trouble and turmoil. And I love the fact that in the Psalms, they're so real. So in the second little section, David faces reality, and he says the reality of life is that it's only trouble most days. It's only trouble. And here's how he says it. How long will you assail a man that you may murder him, all of you, like a leaning wall, like a tottering fence? He felt like a leaning wall, tottering fence, one more push and I'm going over. And people were attacking him and assailing him, and problems. Only they have counseled to thrust him down from his high position. That's the only thing they want, is to get me out of my job. That's the only thing they want. They delight in falsehood. They bless with their mouth. Inwardly they curse. And I love the fact that David, he's not just, okay, only God, and that's it. He's a realist. He goes, only trouble. That's all life is, only trouble. And he pours out that reality before God. And I encourage you this morning, if you feel afraid, you feel like a leaning wall, you feel like a tottering fence, you feel like you're about to go over, you feel like, God, if I have one more bad day, I'm going down. If that's how you feel, say it like David did. David said, I'm a leaning wall, a tottering fence, one more push, I'm over, because they only want to take me out. The Psalms are full of reality. And so you've got this kind of continuum. Only God, only trouble. Only faith, only fear. And somewhere on that line, you live every day, on that continuum between the first two ox. Only God, only trouble. And I don't know where you're at today. If you're kind of way over here, the faith is strong, only God. I know God's going to, or if you're over here and you're like, only trouble, I'm going down. Doesn't matter where you are on that continuum. You pour out your song of trust to God. That's what this is about. The third part is David changes the vocabulary and he admonishes himself to keep on trusting. He admonishes himself to find rest only in God. Here's what it says. Listen to this. Only my soul, wait in silence for God, for my hope is from him. And you might not notice it, but that wait there, it's in the imperative. Only my soul, wait. He's commanding his soul. In verse 1, keep your eye on that because I'm going to reread verse 1 to you. Here's how verse 1 read. Only my soul waits in silence for God. In verse 1, he said, my soul is waiting. It's a declaration. But now it's changed to an admonition. He's commanding his soul to stay in that place of waiting for God. You know why? Because faith moves. Faith moves. Faith leaks. And I can tell you this, you'll be in this service today, and by the end of it, I can tell you for sure that your faith is going to be bolstered. You're going to hear stories. You're going to see this. You're going to lift up what's worrying you to God. And you're going to be, by the end of this service, in a place where I feel strong in faith. I'm trusting God. And I can tell you by tomorrow morning, you'll be freaking out again. Because faith leaks. And you'll go, oh, I know I committed that person to you, but now what am I going to do? God, where are you? That'll be tomorrow. And so, whereas today you'll be saying, my soul waits in silence. By tomorrow morning, you're going to say, soul, wait in silence, because that's reality. Faith leaks, and it has to be renewed day by day. So don't worry about it. David even had to command himself, note to self, keep waiting, soul, because your soul will drift. That's the part of the fallen nature. We drift away from trusting, and it needs to be renewed all the time. Number 4, he warns us against the wrong places to place our trust. He warns us against trusting in men, against schemes, or against riches. And he says, look, be careful. These are only air. They're only a vapor. Do not trust. Here's how he puts it. Only vanity are men of low degree, and men of rank, they're a lie. That word vanity there, back in the book of Ecclesiastes, we heard Solomon, the preacher, say, vanity of vanities, everything is vanity, cries the preacher. And it meant, the word hebel meant uselessness or worthlessness or emptiness. Now David uses that same word to describe placing his trust in people. And he says, you know what? I've tried to find men of low degree and men of rank to get me out of my troubles, and they end up being air. In fact, he says, you can weigh them on the balances together. They go up, and together they are lighter than air. What's lighter than air? Nothing's lighter than air. Well, yes, David says the people I've trusted in are lighter than air. And so he warns against trusting in people. And then he warns against don't trust in oppression or vainly hope in robbery. And I translate that into your strategies, your schemes. Like, well, I'll figure this out. I'm smart, I'll figure out a way around this problem. David says, be careful about trusting people, be careful about trusting your schemes, and then be careful about trusting riches. If riches increase, don't trust them either. Don't set your heart upon them. So 3 things, David says, and I offer this to you now because you might be trusting in one of these 3 things to get out of your problem. You might be trusting in people of low degree, people of high degree, people above you, people below you. You may be trusting in people. You may be trusting in your strategies and schemes, and you're going to figure it out, and I can get through this, so here's what I'll do. You may be trusting in your resources or your riches. Here's the deal. God gives us all 3 of those. He gives us people to come into our lives. He gives us wisdom and shrewdness. And he also gives us resources and wealth. But he does not want you to have your ultimate trust in them. They're extras. Once you place your faith in God and his character, God will begin to show you how to use those other resources, the people, the wisdom, the skill, the strategies, the money, the resources and tools. But don't place your ultimate trust in any of those, David says. Otherwise, you're in trouble. And only you can answer right now in your heart of hearts if your deepest trust is in any of those things, people, strategies, resources, or if your deepest trust is in God to use and guide the process of people, strategies, and resources. You get it? It's an issue of ultimate trust. That's what's going on here. And then the last thing David does at the end of the psalm is he looks square at the character of God. He looks God right in the eyes, and he says, the reason I can trust you is because you are 3 things to me. And he picks 3 attributes of God. He says, once God has spoken, twice I've heard this, that power belongs to God. There's an attribute of God, power. He's almighty. Power belongs to God, and loving kindness is yours, O Lord. And loving kindness is God's love for David. It's loyal love, it's relational love, it's faithful covenant love. God says, you are powerful and you are loving toward me. You love me. And then third, he says, and you recompense a man according to his work. In other words, you are completely just. You know all the issues. You know all the motives. You know all the lying, all the deceit. You know the motives of every person's heart. You know what they're thinking when nobody's looking. You know who has integrity, who doesn't, and you're able to settle the score. So because you are powerful, and because you are loving, and because you are just, I can rest in you. And it has to come down to this, folks, is getting to know the character of God. If you don't know the character of God, you will have a hard time trusting God. If a friend comes to your door, knocks on the door, and you look through the glass door, screen door is probably going up on Memorial Day, and it's your friend, you say, hey, friend, and you open the door, come on in for a coffee. If somebody knocks on your door and you walk up to the screen door and it's a complete stranger, you've never seen the person, you have a little pause, and you click the latch on the door, and you talk to them through the screen door and say, hi, can I help you? It's hard to trust somebody you don't know, right? It really is. The more you get to know the character of God by looking at Scripture and seeing his attributes and seeing his character, and we've given you some good resources in your notes. There's a website by the Navigators called 30 Days of Praying the Names and Attributes of God. I've listed it for you. You can download that and take 30 days just to get to know the names of God and the attributes of God. The more you see God in Scripture and get your head full of the attributes of God, and the more it begins to work the 18 inches down to your heart, and the more you see God in action today in the lives of other people around you, what happens is your knowledge of God grows, and then your ability to trust grows. If you say to me, do you believe that chair will hold you? Do you trust that chair will hold you? Do you have faith that chair will hold you? Well, because I've sat in that same chair so many times, I use it every week, I'll sit in the chair. I'll exercise faith because I know this is my chair. I keep it over there every week. Don't mess with my chair. This is my chair. Your God becomes known to you, and then you trust him. I want to show you a story from this congregation. Today we're kind of celebrating stories. Riley and Megan and the work in their lives. I want to show you the story of a woman named Trina and her husband Lee. Trina came into our church, 19 and a half years ago at the old Northville High School when we had just started. Came in broken, curly-haired, southern accent, broken. Been through a difficult divorce, alone, and just learning to trust the love of God. And I want you to see what's happened in her life and her husband's life as a result of looking at God and saying, I trust you. Watch the story.
Coffee brings us together. It welcomes us. You know, coffee's relational. It creates space for conversation. It's so great that God would use coffee, something that connects people naturally, that he would use that to connect people to our orphanage in Zambia, Africa. This wasn't anything that we had planned in the beginning. Our journey has just taken us places. Some places we really didn't intend to go, but it's been such a great journey.
For me, it all started 1 month after I married Trina. She took me on our honeymoon to Africa with 45 other people.
And for me, I think God was preparing my heart as a little girl to love people and to love the children of Africa. So when Oak Point had its very first mission trip to Zambia back in 2001, I knew I wanted to go, but I remember thinking that I probably wouldn't be able to go because there were so many people that were more qualified. But something inside me was pushing me to fill out an application, and I was accepted. The first year, I was stunned by the poverty and the need of the children. My team was working with orphans, and I wanted so badly to offer more hope to these children.
By the time I went, Trina had already been going for a few years and had been working with Campus Crusade Zambia, reaching out to the children. Some leaders of Campus Crusade caught Trina's vision of caring for the same children year after year.
It's amazing to think that God would allow my dream of opening an orphanage to become a reality. In fact, in 2003, I was really struggling personally, and I just decided I couldn't go that year. But God kept impressing upon me to trust Him and to raise the support and that I should go. And that was the year that Restoration Mission Home was started, and that eventually grew into Living Hope International. And then after Lee came on board and he came to Africa, he caught the vision and he quickly joined the team, bringing a lot of experience and skill. So then we began dreaming bigger and getting more organized and developing a plan.
I admit that in the beginning, I went at this project like any other business project in my career, relying on my strengths, my talents, and my training. We had made plans to build an orphanage, Living Hope International, to transition from Restoration Mission Home, which was just a house, to a campus, a plantation that would eventually be self-sustaining. We needed land, water, and electricity, and these are no small tasks in Africa. The first parcel I found was perfect. I was sure God wanted this for us. But when the landowner saw my white face, the price skyrocketed. Our foundation, our supporters, we just couldn't afford it. We couldn't afford $100,000. This was the beginning of me learning what it looked like to trust in God alone. He was doing a work on my character that I didn't even realize I needed. It was tough to give up the idea that I was supposed to make something happen. God was calling me to trust in Him in the uncertainties, and that was new. And when being right doesn't matter anymore, figuring out what it means to be righteous does. Before our next visit, our Zambian director suggested that maybe we try acquiring land the Zambian way. He said we would approach the tribal chief and seek his assistance. We selected a piece of land that had water and electricity, but it was only 15 acres, not large enough for sustainability. The chief said that he would ask the neighbors if they would donate land. I questioned our director, why would these dirt-poor farmers donate the only thing they had? He told me to have faith and trust in God. The next day we had a chance to share our vision for schools, jobs, and children with a group of farmers whose land surrounded the piece we were looking at acquiring. In the end, 5 farmers donated portions of their property, 25 additional acres in all. This is where Living Hope International now resides. And we acquired the land for 1/5 of what the original parcel would have cost us.
We've been able to see God work and join together people in unexpected ways. Even our introduction to coffee farming is a God story and was brought about through relationships that we could have never orchestrated. Today, we are able to bring premium coffee to people all over the U.S. We're even introducing K-Cups to our line, and every cup helps support the children and the families at Living Hope. But our story doesn't stop here, as we've been doing this for 16 years. Some of our first children are now attending college. We have 2 in medical school, and others have families, healthy families. They've learned skills and contributed to the local economy and provided for their children. But they also have learned to trust in the love of Jesus Christ with goals and hopes and sharing more than just coffee. Coffee brings people together, and while you might see us as a foundation that produces premium coffee, we know that our real harvest is in the hearts of these beautiful children and the generations that come after them, as well as those who come alongside and join with us. It's amazing what happens when you put your plans and your trust in God's hands.
Wow. Wow. Where's Trina? Trina, you here? Trina and Lee, stand up. Curly, there you are. Thank you for trusting God. And are Megan and Kathy Flowers here too? Megan and Kathy, right next to them. They are the directors of LHI. Yeah, thank you. And it was their daughter who danced, Megan. She's going to Zambia this summer too. So all that to say, that's the kind of thing that can happen when you just take a step of faith, you trust. Trina walked in broken 18, 19 years ago. It was a step of faith to walk into a church, a new church, meeting in an old high school with people she didn't know. And then it was a step of faith to join a women's group and begin to be mentored and grow. Then it was a step of faith to begin serving, and another step of faith to go to Zambia, and another step to go again. And then Lee walks in, again, from a life broken. And it was a step of faith for him to walk in and begin to move. I got to do their wedding years ago. I'll never forget it, to see God bringing them together. And then a step of faith to partner together. And Lee, with such skills as an executive and businessman, to by faith have to trust God in ways he never had before, to raise money, to go to Africa, to find land. It's a journey of faith. And I want you this morning, as we close, we're going to sing a song that this week I figured out it's from Psalm 62. It's a modern song called We Will Not Be Shaken. But David said twice in this psalm, because you are my rock and my salvation, my strength, I will not be shaken. And we're going to sing this song as an expression of trust. Again, I told you, by the time you leave here, you're going to be bolstered in your faith, and you're going to say, I will not be shaken. Tomorrow, you have to sing this song again. But we're going to do that. I want you to sing it by faith. Give whatever it is you have to God, whatever trial, whatever fear, whatever turmoil, whatever issue. And I want you to remember baby Carolyn, baby Veda during this song. And then at the end, I'm going to come back and we're going to do one big prayer of faith, lift those things up. And then you're going to hear briefly how you can connect more with LHI and Zambia Coffee. Let's sing the song, We Will Not Be Shaken.
Trust in our God. 'cause we will stand in the fight. Though the armies rise against us on all sides, we will not be shaken. We will not be shaken. We will not be shaken. For in the hour of our darkest day, we will not tremble, we won't be afraid. Hope is rising like the light of dawn. Our God is for us, He has overcome. For we trust in our God, and through His unfailing love, we will not be shaken. We will not be shaken. We will not be shaken. For we trust in our God, and through His unfailing love, we will not be shaken. We will not be shaken. We will not be shaken. All those against Him will fall. For our God is stronger. He can do all things. No higher name we can call. For Jesus is greater. He can do all things. All those against Him will fall. Our God is stronger. He can do all things. No higher name we can call. For Jesus is greater. We can do all things. For we trust in our God, and through His unfailing love, we will not be shaken. We will not be shaken. Oh, we will not be shaken. For we trust in our God, and through His unfailing love, we will not be shaken. We will not be shaken. We will not be shaken. For we trust in our God, and through His unfailing love, we will not be shaken. We will not be shaken. We will not be shaken.
Even that last line, through His unfailing love, we will not be shaken. That phrase, unfailing love, is the same word as the word loving kindness at the end of Psalm 62. It's because God has loving kindness toward us that we will not be shaken. David says it twice in the psalm. So I want you to just imagine visually, put your hands open, and whatever is troubling you, whatever has you awake at night, it might be a person, a problem, finances, it might be school, it might be work, a health issue. I want you just to lift it up to God, close your eyes, and we'll say together, Lord, we offer to you everything that threatens us, everything that troubles us today. And we say, God, you have power. You have loving kindness. You are perfectly just. And we offer to you everything. And we today, right now, in this moment, we trust only in you. Only in you. In Jesus' name.